Hello and welcome to BBC World News. As the apparent New Year's diplomatic thaw on the Korean peninsula continues, Pyongyang and Seoul have agreed to hold military talks with the aim of easing border tensions. In a speech, the South Korean President, Moon Jae-in, said denuclearizing the peninsula was the only path to a lasting peace. Sophie Long reports from Seoul.
Communication between the North and South Korean governments has now been re-established. A North Korean delegation will be present at the Winter Olympics being hosted by the South. And a direct military hotline connecting the two Koreas has been reactivated. But there was barely a mention, and certainly no movement, on the fundamental issue of North Korea's nuclear and missile program. Today, the South Korean president said resolving that was the only pathway to peace.
Korean Peninsula's denuclearization is the fundamental pathway we need to pass, which is totally cannot be compromised, and this should be only way for us to achieve full peace in Korean Peninsula.
Not everyone was in favour of the talks. Some believe that the North Korean leader's sudden willingness to engage with its neighbour is motivated by the desire to drive a wedge between those allied against him as the latest round of UN sanctions imposed on his regime really start to bite. But Moon Jae-in was adamant today that he would not allow that to happen.
For the security, for the defense, South Korea and America is the closest ally. We also do share the importance, the significance of the threat of North. So South Korea, US have been working closely together against North Korea's nuclear threat.
Moon Jae-in vowed to make 2018 the turning point in inter-Korean relations. He hopes the Pyeongchang Games could mark the beginning of a process that would create a life for people here free from concerns about war. But given the year started with the North Korean and US leaders exchanging threats and boasts about whose nuclear button was biggest, he has much ground to cover. Sophie Long, BBC News, Seoul.
Well, let's join Sophie live now in Seoul. Just on the US-South Korean relationship, I mean, he praised Donald Trump, didn't he, for bringing about this diplomatic seeming thaw at the moment?
Yes, he did. Tim, this was Moon Jae-in's first press conference since those historic talks took place yesterday. And yesterday, they agreed that Pyongyang would send a delegation to the Olympics. They talked about some inter-Korean humanitarian issues, and they also agreed to re-establish a military hotline, a direct line of communication between the two countries. What they didn't talk about, what was barely touched upon, was the issue of denuclearization. A member of the South delegation mentioned it just once, and it was almost as if those sitting on the other side of the table politely pretended not to hear it. And we also didn't hear anything about the United States yesterday. Well, today he gave his first press conference. He wanted to focus on domestic issues, but of course all the press assembled were asking him about the talks yesterday. And he really took the opportunity to stand beside the United States in terms of its policy of denuclearization. He said that denuclearization of the North was the only way to a lasting peace here. And as you rightly point out, he was asked about Donald Trump, President Trump, and he did credit him with actually bringing these talks together, which you might remember was the subject of one of Donald Trump's New Year tweets, sort of saying, does anyone believe that these talks would be taking place if I weren't so big, so strong and so mighty, or words to that effect. And Moon Jae-in took the opportunity today to credit President Trump with bringing these talks together, although he did do so with a bit of a wry smile, I think. But I think that what we've heard from Moon Jae-in today really sort of indicates the difficult diplomatic line he's walking here, because on the one hand, he really wants to engage with North Korea in some genuine dialogue, but on the other hand, he really needs to keep his ally, the United States, on side side, and also he won't want to undermine any economic sanctions that have been imposed on North Korea. The last round of UN sanctions was imposed right at the end of December, and some say that those sanctions may now be really starting to bite. So we also heard in his press conference today that South Korea would not ease any economic sanctions against the will of the international community. So while as yesterday it was all about the engagement with the North, today he was taking the opportunity to really stand alongside the United States and the international community in terms of that key policy to denuclearize North Korea.
OK, Sophie in Seoul, thank you very much.